I'm using new technology to try and teach you a semi-complicated concept. So I'll try to go through several examples, different ways of showing it to you, and please ask questions. I know that some of you are paying attention and some aren't, but if you please ask questions like, what does this mean or how does it do it? If it becomes overly complicated, I'll scrap the tablet and go up on the board. It gives me a lot more space to work with. But again, trying to record it if you want to review the stuff, I think it might be valuable. So please, please, please ask questions. Okay, when I'm working with this, let's start with some of the basics that you probably already understand with disks. Let me bring up the tablet. Oh, it's gone again? Okay, hang on one second. I need to switch a couple things then. Not a big deal. Okay, stop showing the screen. And windowed. There or not there? Well, that's a good question. Your computer 12. 12 isn't there. Oh, 12 is there. I'll say 12 wasn't there. Okay, 12 is there. You can see my screen, so I don't have to reset anything. Okay, let's go back to my server. Okay, now I'm actually going to go back to my drawing pad here. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is just drives in general. When we talk about a hard drive, there's a couple ways of drawing it. I'm going to try to draw it as like a rectangle. So think of that as a physical drive. Don't think of your C drive, because when we talk about C, what are we actually talking about? It's a partition. Now, this is where it gets all really confusing, is because we buy a drive and we format it. We're actually creating partitions, but we usually make the entire drive a partition and we label the volume C. And then therefore we say that's my C drive. And that's the correct terminology, but it's technically not a drive. It's a C partition. So inside this drive, I would have, multiple partitions. And in one case, this could be my C drive, and this could be my D drive. And by the way, this is exactly how my laptop is set up right now, is that I have two partitions. I have a C drive as my operating system, and then I have a D drive for my data. Yes, I realize it's the same physical disk. The advantage is, though, when I need to mess around with my operating system or reinstall it, I don't have to reinstall the data. Yes, if the physical drive dies, both drives or partitions are dead, but did you lose it again? Oh, but just realizing that, they are separate, as to how they're working with. So does everybody understand the concept of partitions? And we label them that way. Okay, we do the exact same thing with Novell, and NetWare specifically is the operating system, and the operating system deals with file systems. Yes, we work with Open Enterprise Server as the services laying on top of the network operating system, but we're specifically working with the NetWare file system. We have physical drives. In this case, what we've built so far is we created an 8, actually, is it 8 or is it 20? It defaults to 8. It defaults to 8, but we made it a 20 gigabyte physical drive. So if I looked on my virtual machine right now, it'd say I have a 20 gigabyte drive in there. During the installation, we created a partition, a 500 gig DOS partition, and that's kind of the kernel of the operating system. After that, we created, and it went through several steps at the same time, so it's kind of hard to really differentiate them. We actually created a sys volume, and remember, That was 8 gigabytes as the default. And again, it's just my pen, that's why it's a little messy. I'll try to make it as clear as possible. Remember, we have that 20 gigabyte sys volume. And that's pretty much what we have right now. So we have a 20 gigabyte drive, 2 partitions, and they have a whole bunch of free space. Are we good with this? At least conceptually? Okay. In addition, what you probably don't see is, let me choose a different color, in fact. Well, let's choose blue, because we're going to do pools, and we think of pools as like water. Novell's added one extra layer between the actual volume that we're working with and the partitions that we've separated the disk into, and we've included pools. Now, in this case, the entire volume is taking up an entire pool, which is taking up an entire partition. Can I say it again? An entire volume, the whole sys volume, is used up in a sys pool that I've created in the background, not a cesspool, a sys pool. I know, it's always funny. And it's in a partition that's been allocated for that. Okay, let's take a look at that and see what it looks like on the server side. If I go to partition disks, right here it shows me my physical, well, let's go up one layer actually. It shows me my network, my drive controller. If I had multiple drive controllers, such as IDE controllers or whatever, they'd be showing up as little cards. So one might be there and one might be down here or whatever. But I only have one controller. On that controller, it then shows all your drives that are connected off of there. And this is the symbol for a drive. Not a very good drive symbol, I don't think. Usually I like the little cylinder looking thing, but that's your drive. And it tells me that I have a 20 gigabyte hard drive. Now on that 20 gigabyte hard drive, I have two partitions, and that's what this little symbol is for, is little pie shape thing. And a lot of times when we do document things, we'll use that. We're doing drive partitions. We draw a circle for our drive, and this little pie wedge is a partition. And I do have two partitions. In that partition, I have a 500 megabyte or 494 megabyte DOS partition. DOS uses just simple partitions, so that is my drive, if I want to consider it my drive. I also have NSS, which is Novell Storage Services. Novell Storage Services has its own partition, and it's right now 8 gigabytes. It was created automatically when we created the volume, and I'll show you that process later on when we create additional volumes of how we actually create partitions and pools sort of all at the same time automatically. But because it does it automatically, we don't see it happening, so we get kind of confused and we kind of miss out on some of that experience. So we're going to spend a lot of time really going through this in detail. Okay, underneath this partition then is where I have the pool. And it kind of looks like a hot tub with 4 little seats around it or something. It's blue. I don't know. I'm not sure how you're going to remember that it's a pool. It's a pool. Now, a pool is just a collection of places to put stuff. That's all it is. We're not limited to physical disks. I'm going to show this to you in a little bit. So you're going to say, well, why would it's like that's an extra layer for anything? I'm not restricted to the limitations of a disk. I can actually pull from different partitions from different areas to add to that pool, and I can make that pool larger and larger and larger and larger. So you could actually end up with pretty much essentially an infinite sized pool. And then once you have a pool, you can create volumes underneath the pool. And you could have multiple volumes within that pool. So partitions are in fact limited to a disk. So you have a physical disk, and it's going to be limited to, partitions are limited to that physical disk. If you have a 10 gig hard drive, you can only have 2 5 gig partitions. That's all you get. If I have multiple drives, though, I could keep grabbing partitions from those additional drives and dumping them into a pool, make them larger and larger. So right now my pool is 8 gigabytes. Oh, 7.8, it rounds a little bit. in this 8 gigabytes, I have this sys volume that I can work with. Okay, so what can I do with this? Well, let's go back to our drawing. Well, the first thing that I can do is, in fact, create another partition. And in that partition, create another pool. And by the way, pools are named separately from their volumes. So I'll call that pool data. Sorry. It's kind of like signing your name at the grocery store. And then within there, I'm going to be making a volume, and I'll just call the volume data. So again, they really are separate. The volume and the pool, you typically name them the same because it makes sort of sense. So I'm going to show this process to you. I'm going to take up the remainder of there and create a data volume for you. So to do that, I have free space. I have 11 gigabytes of free space on here. And I click on Create. And when I click on Create, it brings up what kind of partition do you want to make. We're going to be working specifically with Novell storage services. There's other options. There's the traditional file system, the older way of doing things, and then there's the Novell iSCSI. iSCSI is a whole different world in itself, and we're not covering that in this class. So we're taking the normal Novell storage services. Now you can see I can create a new pool in here or create a new pool and volume at the same time, sort of a one sweep type thing. To give it a little bit more realistic, I'm going to make it the pool first. So I'm going to create a pool. Okay, of that remaining 12 gigs on your hard drive, how much of it do you want to use for this pool? Well, I'll use all of it for this example. I'm going to go back and delete it anyways, so it's not going to make any difference. But the pool size, I'll just make the whole thing. And I want to call the pool data. And so I create it. Are you sure you want to create this pool? Yes, I am. And so now you can see I have a new partition. So I never actually created a partition. Partitions are created automatically when you create pools. And that's sort of a step that's kind of missed that we don't actually have a lot of control over. It just happens in the background. So I created a 12 gigabyte pool. Well, it needed to put it somewhere. Pools need to exist somewhere. So it ended up making it a new partition. So I made a new partition and put a pool underneath here. Well, what can you do with that pool? Well, let's put a volume inside of there. You can't put data in a pool. You have to put data on a volume. So I'm going to add a volume to here. What do you want to call it? Well, just to make it consistent, I'll call it data as well. Now here's some volume attributes, and we'll talk more about them later on when we get specifically into some of these features. Things that you probably want to regularly work with, though, is ensure that backup and salvage, those are defaults. They're going to be checked on there. Salvage, by the way, is like the recycle bin of the Windows world. But we also like to work with directory quotas and user space restrictions. So adding those two, directory quotas and user space restrictions. And now when I create it, it's just created. Now if you notice, there's really no size for a volume. Volumes don't have sizes. They just take up the whole pool size. So right now, if I looked at this volume, in fact, I can do that. Oh, I'm sorry, one more step. This volume looks different than this volume. What's the difference? It's not underlined. Means I can't really access it. Why can't I access that volume? It's not mounted. So I need to go and mount it. Once I mount it, it becomes available. And I'm able to use it. If I go back and click on volumes under Server Manager, here it now shows you that I have these volumes. If I want to click on information about any of these, there's a little information icon. I click on it, and it tells me that here's my data volume, and I have a 12 gigs capacity of this drive. And it says that none of it's used, 0% used, which is what we'd expect because we just created it. There's nothing on it. If I click back on volumes, I click on for sys, it sure shows a different story. It does show that you have 8 gigs, 24% used, 76% is free. Going back to partition disks. Something you can do with this is under the data pool, I still have this add volume. Okay, let's add a volume. Let's call it data 2. And I'll put the same features on it. And I'll mount it. So I have data and I have data 2. These are two separate volumes, right? Where are they located? In the data pool. So let's take a look at them. I click on volumes. I now have data and data 2. If I look at data, it says that I have 12 gigs capacity, right? And I go to volumes, I click on data 2, click on the info button, and I have 12 gigs of capacity. That's awesome. I have 24 gigs of stuff to dump out there on the server on these two volumes. What? What do you mean it doesn't make sense? You cannot use it twice. This is known as overbooking. And you can do this. Not and you know, there's reasons that you may want to do this. You know, who's going to use up more space? You know, do you really want to allocate this space just for this one department when, you know, they end up not using it and somebody else needs more space or whatever? There's pros and cons to all of this. We will typically not be doing overbooking in class, just to keep it simpler and more straightforward, but just realize that is there. There is only 12 gigs of physical space in the pool, but I could have multiple volumes thinking that that's what's available. Now, as you start using it up, it does report to the other volume saying, hey, you only have this much left, you only have this much left. So users do eventually run out of disk space, and they'll know about it, but they're saying, hey, I'm trying to add this up, and it doesn't add up to 12 gigs. Where am I missing this? It's because it's being shared. It's a shared pool. You know, if you really didn't like that idea, boy, I really don't want to, you know, have this shared. Well, let's get rid of it. Well, how do I get rid of this volume? Yeah, this volume. I don't see any options here. You can't do anything with it while it's mounted. So you need to dismount the volume first. Once it's dismounted, then you have the options of working with deleting the volume and so on. So now I can delete this volume, and now it's less confusing. Realize any data that was on there is now gone, so you would certainly hope to have migrated that data someplace else prior to just arbitrarily deleting a volume. Is this making any sense as far as partitions, pools, and volumes? Kind of? Okay. This is a very common way. We just take a specific area of a drive and then we allocate, you know, it for a pool and then we put a volume inside of it. Same thing as sys. The sys is in the sys pool, which is taking up this partition. And, you know, we have the DAWs partition. So right now we have no free space. I mean, right here is where it would say it. It would say free space, you know, on this disk, there is none. Okay, I'm going to show you some other advantages and features of pools, though. First of all, before I do this, I'm going to hot add some drives to my server. So I'm going to walk up to my server. I'm going to throw some drives at it. I'll show you how to do that. Here's my server. And I'm going to go up to VM. And I'm going to go to Settings. And here are my settings for my virtual machine. I'm going to click on Add. And what are you going to add? I'm going to add a hard disk. I click Next. And it's going to create a new virtual machine for this. I click Next. And the defaults are fine. SCSI is fine. The maximum disk size, it defaults to 8. I'm just going to up these to 20. It doesn't really matter. We're not really putting 20 gigs worth of stuff on there, but it gives you, instead of working with 2 gig partitions, we can work with 5 or 10 gig partitions. And completely your choice is storing the virtual disk as a single file or as multiple files. I'm going to keep it as a single file and click Next. As you notice, it takes the virtual disk file and adds a 1 to it. So it's an additional drive, and I click Finish. So now I have another drive. I'm sorry? Oh, yours says 0? Oh, maybe I was playing with it before and somebody just added another one. I'm going to add another one. So I'm going to add 2 drives actually. Insert next, next, next. Store as a single file. Make it 20 gigs. And now it increments it again. So 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 or 10 to 11 or whatever it's going to be. And I click finish. So now I have 2 new hard drives on here. And I click OK. So I'm done. Now, this will eventually pick up a new drive. To sort of speed things along, I can do a console command though. So I click inside the console and I type in scan for new devices. And I hit enter and it's done. So that's just, it's kind of like going in a control panel and, clicking on device manager and clicking on, scan for devices. It's sort of going through looking for all the hot swappable USB whatever things, and it just does it. Unfortunately, we'll get like a really cool, hey, I found this neat stuff. It just does what it does. Okay, we're done with the server. So let's go back to our client, Control Alt, so I can get my mouse back. Switch back over to the right arrow over to my client computer. And if I, well, I'll just click on partition disks. That'll refresh the screen as well. And now you can see that I have 2 additional drives down here. So on this one controller, I have 3 physical drives. 20 gig, 20 gig, 20 gig. So I have 3 20 gig drives. Everybody seeing that? Okay, did you type in scan for new devices at the, okay. Do you see any new drives? Okay, going back to the server. Well, actually, instead of going back to the server, let's go to this console screen. Scan for new devices. You typed it in this way. Did you add new drives? Switch over to your virtual machine, VM, settings, and it should show up hard disk SCSI, hard disk 2 SCSI, hard disk 3 SCSI. You can move this over a little bit to see it. If they're never, if they don't show up under remote manager, the most common causes are they just never got added. Sometimes we add things and we hit cancel instead of OK, or we close a window instead of clicking OK, or just weird things happen that they don't get added. The second thing is if we don't type this correctly, scan for new devices. It's command line, so you have to type it exactly correct. It doesn't say, oh, I know what you meant, and I'll figure it out. And no button to do that, unfortunately. It would eventually find it, but this is what we need to do. Okay. Switching back to our console, I'm sorry, not a console, partition tab under Manage Server, you should see these additional disks, correct? Okay. Now, we can't do anything with them. We can't add, it doesn't even say free space. That's because we need to initialize the partition table. We need to actually put something on there for us to create partitions. And it's pretty simple. It tells me all my data, my disk will be deleted. I don't have any. This is brand new. So I click OK. And it's that fast. I mean, it's just a real quick flash and it's up. And it doesn't matter the disk size. If this was a terabyte drive, it would take just as quick. It would do it just as quickly to create your partition table. Now it tells me to have free disk space. So I have free disk space. And I can create different things with it. So I could go out here and I could create. And again, a very typical scenario would be, creating the pool and the volume at the same time. Let me just call it volume 1. Volume 1, volume 1. I'm using the entire disk. And if you notice what happened, it actually created an NSS partition. So again, you didn't specifically say create a partition, but it had to do that. Then it created a pool of 20 gigs, and then it created a volume. Now it didn't mount it, and again, there is no volume size. Volumes just take up the size of their pool, and then I go ahead and mount it. So that's a really quick and easy way. So you add a drive and you add a new volume. What if my data volume started getting full though? Expand the pool, but I have no more space on this drive. It doesn't matter. Pools can span drives. So let me just switch back to my drawing real quick. If this is my drawing and I have a pool over here, let me choose the right colors here. If I put another drive in here, what I can do then is actually say I want to expand this pool, and let's just say it's going to take up half of this. So now data is going to be pointing to there and there. Now these are, what was here? This is about 12 gigs here. If I take up half of this, this is 10. It's going to end up making what looks like one large pool that's about 22 gigs. What happens to my volume that's inside of there? Again, volumes are not really restrictive. They just sort of sit in a pool. So if I'm in a big pool, I have lots of data. If I sit in a small pool, I have lots of data, less data available to me. So do you sort of see how this is done? So it's in two different locations on two different drives, but the pool's going to look like one. So let's go do that. So now I'm going to expand this data pool. And the only free space that I have left is on this extra disk. And on that one disk, I have 20 gig free. I only want to use half of it, so I click on it. And well, how much of this 20 gigs do you want to use? And it says, well, all of it. Well, I don't. I want to use 10 gigs of it. And now I click on the pool. Are you sure you want to expand the pool? And I click OK. This is where it gets a little interesting as far as how the screen shows things now. Here's my data pool, and it says it's 21 gigs. Well, that's interesting. This drive is only 20 altogether. How is that possible? Well, if you notice back over here, this partition, this 12 gig partition, is used by the pool called data. So it's using this 12 gigs and this 10 gigs and ends up with a 22 gig pool, which is just what I talked about. So they don't show it quite the same as what I was drawing it, but it's certainly there. Now I click on volumes. I look at my data volume. I didn't do anything different than the data volume. The data volume is exactly the same way, but now instead of showing 12 gigs, it's showing, well, here it rounded to 21 gigs. So if I had, the data doesn't change, the data doesn't do anything different. All I'm doing is, boy, you start getting up that 10, 11 gigs. I'm really running out of disk space. No big deal. Throw a drive in there, expand the pool to the new location, and you're able to, instantly the user says, oh, I have an additional 10 gig free. Going back to partition disks, I can do that additionally with volume 1. Volume right now, volume 1 is 20 gigs. I want to expand it. I want to add an additional 5 gigs. Well, what's free? I only have this much free on this space, on this disk. I click on it, choose 5 gigs, and I expand. So this is a really cool screen. So it shows you physically exactly what's going on. So right now, this volume 1, which is showing up down here, is in the volume 1 pool, which is on this partition of this physical drive and this partition of this physical drive. And I combine it all together, and that gives me 25 gigs. Can I expand the data volume any further? Sure. Expand the pool. I've got 5 gigs left. I'll go ahead and expand it to that extra 5 gigs. It's going to show you of how it's all sort of, together. Here's the last partition of that. I have a 5, well, actually, it doesn't. A 10 gig partition. I'm using some more 5 gig for this data pool and then an additional 12 gig. So, looking through this can get a little tricky. It's like, okay, what's being used where? But it does all map it out. Take a look at volumes. I have a volume 1, 25 gigs, and I have a data volume at 27 gigs. Need more space, add another drive, expand the pool, the volume just gets bigger. Questions so far? You don't defrag. No. Volumes, server volumes in general, but specifically in novels we're talking about here, handle all their fragmentation and optimization automatically. There is no defrag tool. It doesn't store it that way. Correct, correct, correct. It does get a little hairy in some regards, though. Um, right now, we would potentially have a high risk of failure because if any one of these disks failed, we'd actually be losing multiple volumes. So, like, say this third disk failed, we'd actually lose the data volume and volume 1 volume. Well, the pool, right? Well, we lose the pools, but we don't interact with pools. We interact with volumes. So if I had anything stored on volume 1 or anything stored in the data volume, we would not be able to access it if we lost just this one drive. Or if we lost the second drive, we would lose the entire volume 1. So it's not like, oh, whatever was actually saved in volume 1 on this physical drive, that's still good. You just can't access this stuff. It doesn't work that way. It's a chunk. It's a big chunk as a whole. That's where we have redundancy. That's where you use with RAID. You have, multiple drives, and that's all built in here. We're not going to work with that, but that's all built in. So correct, and then put a pool across there, and then you lose a drive. No big deal. You throw another drive in, it resynchronizes or whatever. So it does do RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10. And then you have, obviously you have all the hardware stuff underneath there, but the Novell services do provide some RAID capabilities software. So you don't even have the hardware. You don't need the hardware RAID. We're not going to get into that right now. Where we really want to concentrate on is just getting data out there, and that is working with volumes and pools and that kind of stuff. Now it looks really messy right now, and it's just like, wow, how can I play with this? Well, actually, you can just really back out of this. If I want to get rid of everything that I've done, I need to dismount all my volumes. So I dismount my volume 1, and I dismount my data volume. Don't ever dismount your sys volume. That's your operating system. That'd be like kind of unplugging your C drive. So just don't do it. Now that they're not mounted, I can actually delete volume 1, and I can delete the data volume. Now, because I don't have any volumes in these, I can actually delete the pools. Now that's deleting the whole pool throughout all the different partitions. So as I delete this volume 1, it's going to end up deleting the pool here and there. And so all left is my data pool, which has 3 segments to it. It's on 3 different partitions. I delete that pool. And again, don't ever delete your sys pool. Well, you'd have to dismount it first before you even do that. But then I have all these little partitions still, fragmented all over the place. Not a big deal. Delete them. As you delete them, just like you do in Windows, as you delete partitions, you end up as Windows calls it unallocated space. Here's just free disk space. It's showing all that stuff that's available. delete that partition, delete this partition, and you're right back to where you started. You have a single hard drive with 2 partitions on it, DOS, and then your sys section, and then you have 2 completely empty additional drives. Okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is, oh yeah, I could write the software doing this, and I completely got this. I'm ready to start installing drives right now. And 1 is, what's a pool? How many of you are at a 1? A 2? 3? You're not gonna hurt my feelings, and you're not gonna be embarrassed with anybody else. I just really got to know where you guys are at. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 3 or 4 non-committal, non-voting, absentee ballots or something. Okay. Okay. Does everybody have 2 drives there? 2 clean, empty drives right now? Okay. Very, very basically, we're going to walk through this together, and I'm going to have you create a single volume on each of the additional drives. So on the second drive, I want you to click on Create. And we're going to cheat. What's that? That's okay. But do you have your 2 additional drives? Do you have 2 additional drives? Not partitions. When we created drives, do you have them or not? Okay, hang on a second then.